Undercity, Lordaeron, and all this has been something that has been speculated about for years. Not only did we get datamined models, the labyrinth stuff, and the achievements in Undercity, but you also got the Sylvnas returning in a big way and Forsaken being in the promotional cinematics for Midnight. However, now with the happenings in 12.1, it seems like we may finally have an idea what is going to happen. 12.1 is amani stuff, 12.2 is Xal'atath, and the worldcore. Well, with Kith'ix and the old gods, we may be going to Tirisfal, aka Tirisfal, where Kith'ix was once defeated. The real question though is, how are the Forsaken going to tie into this? Are we really going to get the Undercity revamp in a minor patch, or could it really be a disappointment just like the recalmation of Gilneas? What is everything we know? For MMORPG players, Itemku, this video sponsor, is something that can come in really useful. If you haven't heard of them, Itemku is a digital marketplace built for gamers across a ton of different titles. Whether you're looking to grab game time, digital vouchers, gift cards, or CD keys, it's a super convenient platform to explore all your general gaming needs in one place. They make browsing easy with features like seller ratings, user reviews, multiple payment options, and refund protection so that you can shop with peace of mind. Check out Itemku using the link in the description below. So we've been speculating about the return of Lordaeron and all this Forsaken stuff for years, and there has been evidence about this that has been piling up for years. However, now, finally things may actually be moving forward. So Lordaeron and all this Forsaken stuff made sense because, well, we are getting an expansion in the northern eastern kingdoms and all this is relevant, and we've had a Forsaken setup for years. We've had the return of Sylvnas, we've had the datamined models and all sorts of stuff, and then, well, 12.1 came around and it's about the amani, and we already know that 12.2 is about Xal'atath and the world core, and then the question is, well, how did the Forsaken fit in here exactly? And the even bigger question is, how do we get away from the amani and all this old god stuff into the world core? And looks like we may finally have some answers with the actual story development, seeing that we're halfway through Midnight. So here's the thing, the reason I've talked about Undercity being revamped and relevant, the big Forsaken stuff, really comes from 2 or 3 sources. I mean, one source is the fact that when Midnight was about to be released, we had a Q&A. One of the devs talked about how we could expect the Forsaken to be relevant in this expansion. They outright stated that they won't be as important as the elves, but they will have their storyline. And the biggest evidence that showed us that the Forsaken will be relevant specifically in 12.1.5 is actually some datamined stuff and possible connection with the announced feature. So we've discovered this achievement called To Die in Lordaeron or Undercity, and it was linked to potentially being connected to all this stuff, and it is supposedly related to the delves. Then around the same time they talked about how 12.1.5 will include the labyrinth delves, and well, what is Undercity if not just like one massive underground labyrinth? So this started building the case that 12.1.5 is the big Forsaken patch and that big things are going to be happening in the greater Lordaeron area, but once again, never made sense how we are exactly going to connect all this stuff. My idea was that the Void army was to succeed and then just kind of march south and attack the Forsaken, but the Void has already been beaten back and the answer may just lie in 12.1. So if you follow the 12.1 storyline, it is about the amani and this Loa they allied with in order to defeat Kith'ix, which was this big Kith'ix general that is, by the way, tied in with Xal'atath specifically. If you remember the storyline, Tyr, and by the way we recently had a Tyr storyline, and he himself was suspicious of the Titans, so who knows what is going on, but specifically this battle was actually a relatively recent event that they talked about. So Tyr went down with rebellious Titan servants and he was followed by 2 massive Kith'ix generals that were awakened, who were like the second in power to the old gods themselves. One was defeated, Kith'ix was nearly defeated, and then he fled to lie dormant around the Sandlar Mountains. Keep in mind, this was when the continent was like one giant thing. So what happened was that the trolls were a little curious, and through the Xal'atath dagger he was awakened, and then this whole event started and the entire storyline with the amani ultimately defeating him that we're witnessing right now. However, how I think this ties in with 12.1.5 is Tirisfal Glades, and I think that might just be the next stop down the line with this whole Kith'ix stuff. So Tirisfal, which is literally named Tirisfal, is the place where his tomb is, and we went here back in the day. This is actually where we originally found the Xal'atath dagger that literally turned this into the whole saga. Honestly, this kind of seems like the perfect tying point to put all this stuff together. I mean, we already know clearly that 12.2 is the full Xal'atath patch where we are finally going to deal with her. Spoiler alert, but the new cinematic talked about her becoming Azeroth, and the patch is going to be like this big transition into the last Titan, obviously. 12.1 starts with Kith'ix, so it makes sense that Tyr's Tomb could be like the in-between, like the transition period where we have to do something in order to reach Azeroth's world core and find Xal'atath, and like she might throw like this diversion at us. And at the same time, as we are in Tirisfal, this is obviously right next to Undercity. Who knows, there could be some underground network here or something that involves the Forsaken. I mean, Sylvnas has already returned. She was in this big cinematic. Her storyline seems to be set for the last Titan, as she revealed that the whole Shadowlands is a hoax. But the Undercity involvement makes a lot of sense as well. I mean, we could technically see Sylvnas really soon. Now, personally, I don't know if a complete revamp of Undercity in a minor patch is possible. It doesn't seem crazy likely at this stage, honestly, but they already kind of revamped a part of it. I mean, they recently had a Forsaken Legacy storyline, so something could be possible. Further evidence for more Forsaken involvement in Midnight is just some things that have kind of been piling up for years. For example, we've had these light Forsaken horses, a few more datamined Forsaken assets, with strongly foreshadowed that the Forsaken Paladins could be relevant, which kind of makes perfect sense right now with the light storyline. And the other bit of evidence is that the Forsaken were literally in the intro cinematic for Midnight. Remember the promotional material with Alonso's Foul and the Forsaken attacked by the Scarlet Crusade and Lordaeron and the Light? I mean, in what way is that related to Midnight in any way? I mean, sure, Lordaeron, but if the expansion really was about the elves and the void, I mean, they could have done a whole lot of other elven stuff to promote it early on, but they decided to pick the Forsaken, so something is going on with that. So based on the recent 12.1 Kith'ix stuff, we might finally have the answers about how this is going to connect and how we're going to go from Silvermoon to Undercity to the world core. Now, the only problem I kind of see with this is that I'm honestly a bit worried that we could be getting another unfortunate reclamation of Gilneas. Like, remember how Gilneas returning was like this big thing? I mean, I've personally talked about it for years and years. It was supposed to be like this whole massive event that was foreshadowed by Blizzard for years, and then we just ended up getting like this random questline and everyone literally forgot about it 2 weeks later. My biggest fear about this right now is that realistically 12.1 is the Amani, 12.2 is Xal'atath stuff, so we're only kind of really left with 2 minor patches for Undercity, which could potentially mess up the whole thing, just on the whole scale of things. I mean, technically, former Lordaeron, these Forsaken loose ends and all this stuff is potentially, I mean, it could be content for a whole expansion and at the very least a whole patch, like how we got Undermine as a whole patch back in the War Within. I feel like if we do this in a 0.05 patch, we could just be doing like a revisiting type event instead of a whole revamp. The good news though is that Blizzard has been going on and on about how they're interested in like revamping stuff, like this is now their strategy, just revisiting old areas. Right now we have very strong hints that they plan to revamp Stormwind and Orgrimmar after the saga, so they may have actually invested actual effort into Undercity as it's a part of the whole plan, but honestly, I don't know if it can really happen in a minor patch. However, by this point, it seems almost certain that 12.1.5 is going to be in Tirisfal Glades, potentially involving Kith'ix, very likely involving the Forsaken and Sylvnas, and some new Lordaeron lore. Thanks for watching. Check out if this is really how Midnight is about to end by clicking on the screen, and also subscribe to my brand new Witcher lore channel by clicking on the screen as well. See you next time.